we all have a unique story, and you never know who needs what. And if they can extract the wisdom from your story, they don't have to make the mistakes you made. There's nothing in my experience that'll cause imposter syndrome and frustration more than having the answer, but not having the conviction to speak it because you're in misalignment with the answer.
Ben Albert is the owner of Balbert Marketing LLC, as well as the curator of the Real Business Connections Network, where he hosts 5 podcasts. That's right, 5. Once an underdog, now a successful entrepreneur, Ben is passionate about helping other underdogs achieve their dreams. You might be thinking, Ben Albert, that's a really familiar name, because this is round 2 of having Ben on the show. Ben has become a very good friend of mine over the last year. I love conversations with Ben. We have our other show. So technically, I don't know if he counts this as one of his 5, but we have a 6th show that he can start counting, which is the Lunch Break ABCs, where him, myself, Christine Smith, and Andrew Biernat get together to share philosophies and tips and stories on topics that you choose. And this is round 2 of Ben Albert on the Be Better broadcast. So if you're ready to dive in, all that we ask, the fee for the show, is when you take something away from this conversation, please share the show with just one other person who could use it as well. We've grown the way that we have over the last 2 years, especially the last year, because you are the best part of the Be Better team and you share the show, but only if you take away a piece of value. Without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ben Albert. Great to have you back, brother.
I'm excited to be here. I was going to say when you're doing the intro, I think it's actually technically 5.25 because of ABC. And I don't know if you remember this. Last time we did this, the internet exploded. So we can tackle any topic we want because I think we might have lost part 1. I lost sleep that night, Brandon. I've been thinking about this ever since I've been thinking about this day.
That was the only time that that's ever happened on the show too. And it was that episode. So that's really cool. It's good to know that we can really dive into any area that we want. So I definitely want to touch on your underdog story for sure. And one thing that I just want to commend you for is, out of everyone I know, and not just like the online space of people I know, but like my friends in real life and like family and everything, I really, really respect the hell out of you, man, for many reasons, but just your ability to continue moving forward in the face of struggles, in the face of even loss in your life. You have your new office now. Like, you're always looking at, I know it's beautiful too. Like, let me expand the view for those watching. He's got the nice blue walls, freshly painted. It probably smells great in there. You've got your show poster. He's going to like add some more things here in the future, but you're just always moving forward, man. And I really do my best to be around other people who are also moving forward. And I'm just really grateful to have you in my circle, brother.
Grateful to be here. I could say the exact same thing about you. I mean, you've got a little one coming into your life and you still continue moving the momentum forward. And I commend you for that. And dude, I got goosebumps. Is this like a therapy session? I feel good. You feel good.
I love that. Yeah, man. I gotta set an example, so that's one of the newest priorities for me. But let's talk about you. Let's get right down to it. So tell us, how were you an underdog, especially like the man I see now? Like, it's hard to believe that at one point you felt that way. And maybe you still do at times, and I'm curious to hear that. But like, where did this underdog journey begin for you?
It's funny because I've been on a lot of podcasts and you say, let's talk about you. And I still have like a hints of, do I really want to talk about myself? Like, everything I accomplished was in direct reflection with the people I surrounded myself with. And I think there's this toxic, mentality that I pulled myself up from my bootstraps and grinded my way to success. And I guess you kind of could do that and rip a lot of people off and, hurt a lot of people along the way. I always ask the question, if you feel like you're pulling yourself up from your bootstraps, well, who made the bootstraps? Who made the boots? Who delivered the boots through the supply chain? If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? who cares if no one is there to notice or experience it? So what is success without other people? And we can talk about what I did, but I just kind of want to set that standard that nothing I did was on my own. It was all just by surrounding myself with the right kind of people, learning from them, in some cases becoming them in different categories, and in other cases realizing that I don't want to becoming them, and audibling and creating my own life. So dude, it's funny you say let's talk about Ben, and I'm like, let's talk about people Ben knows. It's none of this is possible without other people like yourself, Brandon.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's you show that in what you do. I mean, you speak with people every single day on one of your many different shows. I mean, it's obvious that people are a big part of your life, and it is for me too, because I've always been a really curious person. I've always loved asking questions, and your LinkedIn headline literally says, it might not say this anymore, but I think it does. I ask questions for a living, which I think is really cool because I feel the same way. And I've had to actually step back at times and begin asking myself, is this my thought, or is this a thought because I heard someone else say this, especially with like, political opinions or religious opinions or even business opinions? Like, am I doing this because I want to do this particular thing, or is it because I heard someone else say it? So that's one of the struggles I think I found by having conversations with a lot of other people. Although I definitely feel like I've taken a lot more benefit away from surrounding myself with these positive and powerful role models than the opposite. Would you agree? Do you find yourself in that situation that I just mentioned at all?
100,000% agree. I was in the shower this morning, and I was taking too long of a shower because I was trying to do the math on the amount I'm investing financially and the amount of time I'm investing. And I couldn't do that. Like, I need to pen to paper, figure this out. But we're talking literally hours a day, time in personal growth strategy. And currently I'm in groups. So it's not one-to-one coaching. It's more affordable, but I pay for 5 mentors because they're cooler than me. I want to be friends with them. I'm going to pay them for that opportunity. And it's funny, average of the 5 people, I just by chance am paying 5 people right now. And each one of those people play a different role in my growth and development and becoming who I am.
That's absolutely true. So if you can just give us like an idea, what types of people, what characteristics do they exhibit? Let's use these 5 as an example. You don't have to name them, but you're welcome to. But like, what about these 5 people made you say, I'm going to take the hard-earned money that I have and invest in furthering myself through the use of these individuals?
It's a great question. And I think a lot of it's intuitive. They have something in some category that I don't. And I might have it. I might be a 6 out of 10. I might have it, but they have it in abundance. And what better way to raise myself up in that category, to better myself, to continue to grow, than to learn from the best? So one of my mentors, Brian Bogert, we've talked about on ABC. He's a friend of mine. He teaches, basically helps people find who they are when everyone's, looking for the next car, the next girl, the next what in the world, the next thing that they're going to consume, we forget about looking inward and figuring out who we are. And I know you've talked about that in some of your inner journey on the show as well, but I've been realizing that most my life I lived in a reflection of trying to impress someone who doesn't even care about me. Spend most of my life trying to impress people, figure out why I am this way and why I'm not this way. And honestly, I don't even know who Ben is half the time. But Brian brings that out of me in a beautiful way. And then just to give you one more example, because I just started working with him, Nick Sananastaso was born without arms or legs. He has like a nub on one of his arms. He was born without arms or legs and still became a wrestler, skateboarder, friends with The Rock, and got to a level where he's a fitness model and he tours with Tony Robbins.
Wow.
Now, that man has been through adversity I complain about having an alcoholic father and being a short kid once in a while. I'm getting sick of my own story because it's average, it's ordinary, and I know people can relate to it, but it's nothing compared to what Nick had to go through. But if Nick can go through that life and have the mindset, conviction, resiliency to overperform to greatness on a whole new level where he's touring with Tony Robbins in his mid 20s,
Wow.
that man is something he can teach little old me that hasn't been through that adversity, but I don't have to go through that adversity because I can learn from the man who did and learn the strategies he implemented to get through that. I could keep going on, but everyone that I'm spending money with has something slightly different than each other. I have a sales coach, I have a marketing coach, and then there's millions of hours of free content out there that I'm consuming as well. So it's not like you have to start investing thousands a year. You could just type in Alex Hermosi and he just gives it all away for free. So he's an
Yeah.
example.
Like what you just said makes me think about just, my story that you just mentioned. Like I talk about, I was a fat kid growing up, and in my early 20s, I was depressed and I was making this money, but I had nothing else in my life. And it's like, I don't like to say this, and I want to tread carefully here, but at the same time, I feel that people listening will get what I mean. When I say that, it's almost like I don't even have the right to be upset about those things when you compare it and have perspective of people like this Nick individual that you mentioned, who doesn't have arms, he doesn't have legs. Like here I am with arms, with legs. I've got a healthy body, right? I'm feeling good. I've got things going for me. Yet there are still days that I will sit there and I will think in my mind, I'm not as far ahead along as I want to be. Am I moving quickly enough? Like just these thoughts that I have, even being, almost 300 podcast episodes, like am I doing what I need to be doing with the show? Am I sharing it enough? Am I having the right people on? Are the viewers happy? Like just these thoughts. But then when you think about in your mind, this other person has no arms or legs, yet look at the life that he's created for himself. He's a fitness model. He's touring with Tony Robbins. He's a skateboarder. Like all of these things that most people without arms or legs would never even think of doing. Most people with arms and legs would be afraid of doing and would think, oh, there's no way I can be a fitness model. Look at Heidi Klum. There's no way I can look like Heidi Klum. I can't be a fitness model. Like just that shattering of the paradigm of I am not meant to do this thing. It's so powerful to see someone who shattered that paradigm, because then that shows us, damn, if this guy can do it, then I can do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I felt the same way. I just said it I'm like, me complaining about my dad is just lame. Feels that way sometimes. But then I remember we all have a unique story and you never know who needs what. And if they can extract the wisdom from your story, they don't have to make the mistakes you made. I'd hate to say this, but Nick would probably agree with me. If Nick didn't accomplish much, just the fact he has no arms or legs isn't compelling. It's what he accomplished. But if he didn't accomplish much, you and I having arms and legs and not going through what he went through, it's actually kind of unrelatable. But your story of being the fat kid and having a mentor come in your life and call you out, and the way it was able to build yourself inward and outward and grow your sales, and then the way you use that lesson to grow other people's companies, that is very relatable. And you would be doing the world a disservice not to share that story because it is so darn relatable. We're all doing the world a disservice by not sharing our story unless it's not completed yet. If our story is going to talk about complaints and struggles and point fingers at other people, we haven't earned the right because it's incomplete. I used to point fingers at people, but I realized that it was myself that was to blame. Once I made that realization, I can tell the story. But if you're pointing fingers, if you're negative, if you're just creating drama, maybe your story's incomplete and it's not ready to share. But since you've learned so much from what you went through, Brandon, you'd be doing the world disservice by not sharing it. So I have the limiting belief, and then that's kind of the reframe that allows me to be like, oh wow, we all have something really powerful and important to share.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the fact is we've got arms and legs, so we can't use that story, right? We
No.
only have our story. And this is why I wanted to tread carefully, because I know some people listening would say, well, come on, man, like you can't think that way, because there's always someone out there who is in a worse place, which is why whenever someone says, hey, there's people out there with no food, like, yes, I get that. And that's a terrible thing. And at the same time, that's not me. And it's not the best thing to invalidate the emotions that one is feeling. It doesn't mean suppress them. It doesn't mean like completely act on them, but it just means be aware that you're having these emotions, like the emotions that I had. Like I was unhappy when I looked in the mirror, right? The emotions that you had as the underdog, looking around saying, oh, I can't do that. I can't do this because I'm shorter, whatever it is. Like those emotions, it's okay to experience them. And if someone comes along and says, oh, you shouldn't feel that way because look at that person over there, he's an inch shorter than you, it doesn't validate it's still, you see what I'm trying to say here?
Yes,
It's okay to feel the way that you were feeling at that time.
absolutely.
And like you, continue to move forward on the path to becoming the hero, because I know there's someone listening, Ben, who they're at a point in their life in some area, whatever it may be. Maybe it is their physical fitness. Maybe they were also short. Maybe they're still short and they're struggling with it and they're in high school, whatever it might be. Maybe you're speaking to the younger version of you who's listening and they're like, wow, I really relate to this.
Yeah.
If you thought about this concept of zero to hero, and I don't like really saying zero, but it's funny, so we'll say it, but I think everyone realizes I don't truly ever believe you're at zero,
No.
right? I think it's there. It's only up. It's only up from there. So like if you were counseling the younger Ben and you had the blessing of having the older version of you in front of you, where would you help him to begin making this forward journey?
That's a powerful question. And I like that you brought out like there is no zero. Let's treat zero as a net average. So we all have a baseline level of blank. Happiness is a great example. We have baseline, we go on vacation, we splurge, we meet someone, we sightsee, our happiness level raises, but then it's still going to reduce back to baseline unless we enact different habits into our life to raise baseline. So let's say net baseline zero, you can actually do things that are net negatives, similar to what I did a lot of my life, and that's drink myself into a stupor. Where a quote that I recently heard that I love is, when we're born, we look like our parents. When we pass away, we look like our choices. When we're born, we look like our parents. When we pass away, we look like our choices. And the worst fear in my life is meeting the man that I could have been. It scares the shit out of me, dude. So we're all starting at a baseline. We're built different. We have a different culture. We are raised differently. We can't change any of that past. So we take our net baseline at any given day. That can be our zero. That can be our average. That we're going to start at zero going forward. I've literally never said this before. I'm kind of figuring it out as we go. But
Yeah.
I would tell myself, you can't change anything that passed. What we need to do is incrementally enact the right habits, the right mindset, and the right actions ultimately to get you where you want to be. Because I don't know if my younger self would realize this or listen to this, but it's scary as hell to look at who you could have been. And you look in the mirror. This is something that I ran into, and it really hurt when I realized it. I was doing affirmations. I was meditating. I was doing all these great things, but I was drinking myself to death. So when I'm looking in the mirror, doing my affirmations, you're good enough now and you're only getting better, or you're an open channel for creative ideas. You act as if you already have what you want. When I do these affirmations, but I'm looking at myself with dead, bloodshot eyes, and there's no life, and I actually feel like anxiety in my body And like when I shower, I feel like my blood pressure is too high. Do you think any of those freaking affirmations are coming true? No. And then the shame that builds up, and then the anger towards oneself that builds up can literally cripple you, and it was literally crippling me. How did I get out of it? I didn't snap a finger. I didn't just give myself to a higher power. I'm not saying that's wrong, but it's not like one moment happened. There is no specific hero's journey where there's just a saving grace that takes me to hero. I had to actually start implementing the things I knew, because there's nothing in my experience that'll cause imposter syndrome and frustration more than having the answer, but not having the conviction to speak it because you're in misalignment with the answer. This is how I need to eat. This is how I want to feel. This is who I want to be with. This is what my future self is going to be. Okay, let's roadmap how that can actually be possible. Every decision I'm making is in misalignment with that.
Yeah.
Are we going to get there? And I just started to realize that I couldn't hurt myself anymore. And I needed to surround myself with people that would make me better instead of bitter. I need to make decisions that would make me better instead of bitter. And by surrounding myself with the right mentors and taking daily action, it's funny, like we talked about 0 to hero in under a year. Like I was furloughed from work and then replaced my sales executive income in just under a year. And we can get tactical if you want. But what's hilarious is that was less than a year period, but it was a lifetime in the making to position myself for that less than a year period. Because it might take 6 months for someone to leave an income and replace it, leave a relationship, replace it, leave a struggle and replace it. It could take a month. It could take 6 years. It could take 5. We don't know, but our lifetime is being made in every choice we make. And I was at the core, I never really thought about it this way because I usually get tactical. The reason the tactics worked was because I was betting on myself and I took the action to make the tactics work. So I'll just pause there. Brandon, you're like my therapist, man. I decided I listened to a podcast today. And I promise I'll shut up after this. It's Dropping In with Charlie Hubert. And one thing he was talking about, he comes from a similar situation where he was a dating guy and he learned the strategies and tactics, what to say, when to say it, all these things that he implemented into his life. But then he found that he was never being present in the moment. And this is how I feel a lot of the time. He wasn't being present in the moment. He was just triggering, oh, this triggers this joke. This triggers this smile. This triggers this story. And he was just reliving experiences. And he put Tony Robbins on the spot. He's like, Tony Robbins is a brilliant speaker, but it's like everything that comes out of his mouth is A/B tested neuroscience, like NLP, persuasion, public speaking, perfected to the T, where he doesn't have confidence that Tony's ever fully present, other than he's triggering his next thought that he's already practiced a million times. Don't know if that's true or not. Whoa. But then a Russell Brand, if you ever watch Russell Brand, you never know what the frick's going to come out of his mouth. You literally don't know what's coming next ever. And I'm not saying be like Russell Brand and this like fly by the seat of your wheel at all times, or be like Tony and has Tony's strategy. It works. Like he's refined. I came in today and I'm like, I trust Brandon. I'm going to be as present and in the moment as possible. And a lot of what I'm saying today, I haven't said on a podcast before, because I made that decision to be present. And I can go back and A/B test if it worked or not, but that's what we're doing today, man.
I freaking love it, man. And that's really cool. And I've got definitely some follow-ups on that. But I wanted to ask you, do you think that you were betting on yourself at the time when you looked in the mirror and you said the affirmations, you were doing the things that you knew would help, right? You obviously did these with great intentions. and then you would drink later on, right? Or maybe you drank before. I'm not sure of the sequence of things, and that doesn't really matter. But the
The
reality is,
sequence was all over the place at all times.
okay, so the reality is there was constructive behavior, but there was a large destructive behavior that was heavily taking away from the constructive things. At that point, were you betting on yourself? And if not, then when did you begin to bet on yourself and make these positive changes?
It's a good question because I like to give the analogy, it's you see the North Star, but you're running backwards looking at it. I'm moving away from it, even though it's in sight. Um, it's interesting because I was betting on myself, but I was a poor gambler. Like I didn't actually have. You can bet on yourself to be the next, NBA player. You can bet on yourself to be the next Jimmy Page on guitar. But if you don't put in the work required to accomplish that, you're going to lose that bet. I cared about myself. I loved myself deeply. I was going through things internally that I still haven't entirely unpacked, but like I cared about myself and I wanted to be better. And still to this day, I have lifestyle decisions that hold me back. So was I betting on myself? Yes.
Hmm.
But was I making the right bets? Was I, counting cards? None of that. I was basically just, let's gamble today. Let's just throw some money and hope it's throwing it at the wall and hoping that it sticks. And then it sticks one time and you think it's going to stick every time, or it never sticks and it's not sticking because you don't have a sticky enough thing in your plate to make it stick. But regardless, there wasn't any strategy. I, I actually don't know. I need to figure that out because I had the strategy, I had the tactics, I had the guidebook, but I only implemented the guidebook 20% of the time.
Mm.
So I was still betting on myself, but I wasn't doing a good job of it.
I was betting on myself, but I was a poor gambler. Wow. I wrote that down. That's profound, by the way. That's like a Johnny Cash lyric. That's really good, man. I freaking love that. And it's true because of course you want better for yourself. Even the drug addict. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Even the drug addict is betting on themselves that things will be okay. But like you said, they're throwing it all away at the same time. They're not gambling in a wise way. So that question of, well, how do you gamble in a wise way? Because life really, there's many things that you can do to get a specific result that you want in life. But a lot of life is chance. And a lot of, especially coming from sales, man, like the people who weren't doing as well, and this is still to this day, I mean, it's just human nature. They would say, well, that person does better because they work a different shift than me. They close rather than open, and closes are busier. Or that person they're just a luckier person in their life. They're always lucky. Every person they talk to wants to buy something. And yes, I do believe that there is luck, and luck has definitely impacted me. However, I do believe that we create that luck and we create that opportunity by our thoughts, and not even by our thoughts, because I don't believe that our thoughts are our own. I believe that our thoughts are just these things that pass through and we decide, hey, I like that one. I'm going to take that one and I'm going to believe it. Or I'm going to take that one and go deeper down the rabbit hole of that thought. But based on the ones that you accept and take and decide to act on, because our actions come from those thoughts, you are in a way creating a different reality, right? And I believe that that is what luck is. And then you got the cliche saying of luck is when preparation meets opportunity. But I definitely believe that there is some chance there.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about the sales thing because it's so darn simple. I learned this from a mentor of mine, Brad Lee, and he says, do more and get better. So let's say you're working let's say across the board with your company, the AM shift is less sales than the PM shift. You can still do more and get better. The more hands you shake, the more money you make. The more interactions you have, the higher probability you get a sale. And then what happens when you run out of time to shake hands and have conversations? Well, you need to get better. And then you get as good as you can in the position you're in, with the region you're in, with the time slot you're in. And if you do more and get better, and let's say PM does draw better sales, do you think that they're going to give you that opportunity if you're the highest optimal person in your region? If you go into a region where no one's successful and you raise revenue by 40% and you're still not top, but you're exploding in a region where everyone didn't have success, do you think they'll give you a better region? So there's do more, get better, than optimize. Optimize for your time, your location, what kind of people am I talking to, what region am I working in? But you can't optimize if you're not doing more and getting better, because they're not going to give you the optimal opportunity unless you prove that you deserve that. So you do more, you get better, you optimize, and then you've done all you can in the time given. You're doing as good as anyone ever could. You're in an optimal position and you're out of time. You're out of energy. What happens then? You scale. It's that
Mm.
simple. Once you run out of time, you just find someone that you can teach, train, help supplement your time. So you do more, you get better, then you optimize for where you should be and when, and then you scale. And then, we all have the same 40 hours in a week. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. Well, it's funny. Brad jokes that he has 10 PhDs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't have a single PhD. He just hired 10 PhDs. And that's where scaling comes into play. So that's my rant on sales.
Wow.
Because it's easy to blame and pass judgment on others or even yourself. All you can do is do more and get better in the most optimal way you've been given. And then you will earn the right to move forward and then eventually scale. But none of that's going to happen if we feel sorry about ourselves.
Make up in quantity what you lack in quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a phrase that we used to say to all the new people, because we always said your closing rate is going to be like 40% at the beginning. After you do more, get better, and optimize, your closing rate will become about 80%. So
Right.
you can take 2 customers in a day and earn what you need to earn versus 5, which you're actually working harder by taking the 5 and earning less. But like you said, I think it's relevant to every area of life, not just sales, but do more of it so you learn, right? Get better. But you do that by learning, by reading, by surrounding yourself. The fastest way
You
is
get
surrounding
better by
yourself.
doing more too, but surrounding
Yes.
yourself helps, but you're never going to learn just by reading.
Mm,
You're going to learn by doing.
yeah.
So the more you do, the better you'll get with the education. But if you just learn it but don't implement it, nothing happens to it.
You're sober now,
Not
correct?
100%. I like
Okay.
to have a cocktail. I like to have a
Sure.
beer. This could even be a limiting belief, but I don't think the world lives in black and whites. And I enjoy to have a beer at my friend's band on a Saturday night.
I
So
agree.
I'm not entirely sober, but that's a tough topic, because one could make the argument that I'd probably be more successful if I was entirely sober. But my God, do I love and enjoy the shit I do. So it's finding that blend.
Now, let me ask, because I really love that, by the way, because I have always been a proponent of, and I know this is not going to be accepted by everyone, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And I hope that they'll continue to listen to hopefully understand our point of view. But the idea of, as an example, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a beautiful program,
Mhm.
absolutely beautiful. It helps so many people, and it's amazing. And you're always in that program an alcoholic, even when you're sober for 20 years, 30 years. You haven't had a drink in 30 years, but you still consider yourself an alcoholic. And they say if you have a drink, like, you got to start the countdown at that
Mm.
point, right? But then there's people like you, and I know other people like you, who you used to drink a lot more. Would you agree with that? Like, you would drink a lot more than you would now with the cocktail every now and then.
About 10 to 20x.
Wow. But you're able to have a drink even though in your past you were an alcoholic, right? Like, do you still identify? I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed.
Sure.
Did you identify as an alcoholic?
I just identify as a human trying to figure shit out. I don't know how to answer it because sometimes I call myself a podaholic because I love podcasts. I'm a musicaholic. I guess I am an alcoholic because I freaking love alcohol. I
Back then,
love
though,
it.
did you
I
consider yourself an alcoholic? Like when you would look in the mirror and you would say the affirmations and you would be drinking 10 to 20 times more than you do now, like, did you think in your mind, this is what I am? Or did you believe the same thing back then, even that you just mentioned?
It's interesting because I don't think I would think you're an alcoholic. It was more you're a shitty person or you don't have your stuff together or you're a mess or you're a liar, which I guess are all things that I guess there's a direct correlation, but I didn't necessarily. Does that make sense? It's not like I was like, Ben is an alcoholic. It's more like Ben doesn't do what he says he's going to do. Ben
Mm-hmm.
makes poor decisions. Ben has trauma. And the alcohol was just the suppressant for these other things. But the alcohol didn't define me. The other things defined me. And if that makes any sense.
I love where it's going because now when you have a drink, is there guilt? Is there shame? Or when you have that drink, you're just like, damn, this tastes good.
Both.
Interesting.
Depends.
What's it
We
depend on?
it's this is why part of why I joke, I ask questions for a living. Like I'm trying to live the most curious life possible. And most things are nuanced. Most aren't exact 0 or exact 100. It's somewhere in between. There's elements of gray. And if I have a stressful day and I sit back and I pour a glass to take the stress off, and then the next day I have a little bit of a headache, then I'm judging my decision from the previous day. But
Okay.
if I'm out at a concert and I have a beer at a brewery and I'm a beer snob and I wanted to try a flight and there wasn't anything to suppress or run away from, it was an empowered decision rather than a cortisol driven, disempowered decision. I think that I see it differently. I'd love to have this conversation with someone who has studied this stuff because
Mm.
I think there's a high probability that I'm in a slight amount of denial. And I'm sure that an alcoholic that has been through this and understands the neuroscience and has been through the therapy and understands, I probably sound like a person who's in denial. And that's probably true. But
In denial of what would you say?
that at the end of the day, I can't make a case for alcohol being a positive thing other than the fact that I enjoy it. I'm
Sure.
willing to bet that my net positive energy levels, my net positive presence, my net positive ability to live in the moment probably would be higher if I didn't consume alcohol at all. But that's like saying no sugar at all. That's like saying no Netflix at all. I
Yeah.
kind of cheat on that a little bit. But if we were to look for optimal result, I would cut out alcohol entirely.
Well, this is the thing, though. I also believe, and by the way, I agree with what you just said completely. And I see the value in knowing yourself. So if you were a person who you went to the brewery and you got 3 flights and you're leaving drunk, staggering, Ubering home, and you're doing that 4 nights a week because you got a taste of it on Tuesday and you're like, oh man, that was really good. It brought me back to the old days of the
Yeah,
10 to 20 times. And then you went back on Wednesday and then you went alone on Friday because you're like, no one wants to go, but I want to drink. That is very different than you going out and having a drink or even having like a couple glasses of wine and then waking up with a slight wine hangover if you have one. Like
true.
that's very different than knowing that you, and I also believe a big part of this is identity. The
Mm,
idea of identifying as an alcoholic at one point because and then continuing to identify as one for as random X person going to Alcoholics Anonymous 30 years after being sober, you still identify as an alcoholic, so that if you have a drink, immediately you're like, oh man, I did it again. I'm once again an alcoholic. I'm going to have more drinks. Again, I've never been here, and I've never had an addiction
Mm,
that ruled my life. Video games might have been one in my teenage years,
okay.
but knowing yourself is so powerful, because could it be denial? Maybe, if you went over the edge with those actions, but you're able to have a drink and then continue on with your life, right? Even me, Ben, like I drink maybe once a week. I'll have a drink out at a restaurant, but if I like do go out like with a friend and I'll have like 3 drinks and then I'll get a ride home and I wake up the next morning, like, yes, if I feel even a slight hangover, I'm like, that was stupid. Why did I do that? But I don't go out the next night and do it over again. Knowing yourself is a huge part of this equation.
Couldn't agree more. You have great self-awareness. You're my therapist. I'm just trying to figure this out as
Well, I'm
here's
here calling you an alcoholic, and then I'm like, oh, wait, maybe you never identified as that.
and it's interesting because if we were to go through, I said, you're born, you look like your parents, you pass away, you look like your choices. A lot of the choices, like countless, like we would need days. I've made so many bad choices. Like, I don't even know why I'm saying this. People are judging me. Well, judge me. I've made a lot of bad choices in all areas of life. And I'm unpacking that so I can be better for the future. But I don't have this figured out. I'm still evolving every day. This conversation's allowing me to evolve and kind of hold myself a little more accountable, that I don't want to pretend like I'm someone I'm not. And I don't want to pretend like hero's journey, I'm Superman flying through the sky. Nah, I'm still learning how to use my magic. I'm still learning how to use my skills. I'm just figuring this shit out as of today, as of the time this comes out. And here's the thing, the person I was 2 years ago, I recognize them, but I'm a whole new human. And the person I'll be 5 years ago, I'll recognize the person today, but 5 years down the road, I'll be a whole new human. And that's part of the beauty of it all.
Yeah, that is beautiful. You're absolutely right. And I like that because it brings us back to what you mentioned earlier when it comes to people like Russell Brand, who he doesn't know what he's going to say the minute before he says it. It just comes out, and it comes out in a funny way and a very intelligent way because he's honed these ideas. And
Yeah.
then you've got Tony Robbins, where I love Tony Robbins, like huge influence on my life. And even still, I'll watch an interview with him, a new interview, and I know his talk tracks at this point. I know what he's going to go to. When someone asks about his past, I know he's going to tell this story, and then he's going to make this joke, and then he's going to go into this next story. And you know what? I still listen most of the time because I like hearing maybe the different way in which he tells the story, the different inflection. I just think the story is a very powerful story. So I'm not saying Russell Brand changed what you're doing, Tony Robbins changed what you're doing. Obviously, they are working very well, right? And it seems as if they are very happy with the results that their communication style and way of being is getting them. In the final minutes here, what would you say on those same lines? What would you say is the key to success in really coming into your own as a human being authentically?
So a big part is self-discovery, but I do want to say this, there isn't a key to success. There's no cheat code. It's a combination lock. It's a padlock, and each of us has our own unique combination. So some of our combinations might have similarities, but why do you think they take your fingerprint when you get in trouble? Because each and every one of us has a unique fingerprint. Each and every one of us has a unique genetic code and unique life experiences and a unique story. So I can't tell you what the key is. All I can do is reflect on what my combination is. And I don't even know if I have it all figured out. So the true answer is to bet on yourself, to take action, and surround yourself with people that are making you better, not bitter, so you can learn their plays. You can follow their plays. You can use their keys and cheat code, but then you can learn how to audible, write your own plays, rewrite the play, do it. You're even like, if we're talking about a playbook, not everyone on the field runs at the exact same speed. They have different strengths. They have different speeds. They have different intuition. Same thing in success. So we want to learn from the people that light us up and can teach us, but we never want to get all culty. And Tony Robbins is an example because he's brilliant. But if Tony's the answer, you're missing all these other people that have answers as well. I'm not aligned with, I'm an alcoholic. I'm not aligned with, I'm a Tony Robbins fan. I'm not aligned with, I'm a Denver Broncos fan. I am all those things. Oh, I just said I was an alcoholic in a sense.
Gotcha.
But I am all those things on a continuum, which is part of my story. It's the balance of all these things creating who we are. So the actual key to success is to find your own combination, but you can't find it without the curiosity and going through the discovery process. So treating it as a constant journey with no end destination rather than something that we reach with strategic goals and specificity.
There we go.
It's an end destination rather than strategic goals with specificity. See, that's a part of me too. I can't say the word specificity.
You just did it.
I didn't do it. You get the point though?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Let me tell you, man. That feeling before you cry of like when the water is like in your eye and you know it's gonna come out. Like I have that right now. And it's like from like a happy sense of being, if that makes sense. Like this is probably one of the most fun times I've had on the show. And I know that because like you made me laugh, you made me smile. Like the fact that that's happening, like absolutely incredible. And I could tell that all of it came from a very Russell Brandish way of being present in the moment, and a very Ben Albert way of being, I should say, of being in the moment, of hearing the question, of diving into the topic. I appreciate you being vulnerable during this conversation and allowing us to talk about your story in different and new ways. And I apologize for labeling you as something that you were not, but then at the end,
you're great. You're amazing. And thank you for the opportunity. We actually had a plan for what we were going to talk about today. I derailed it and you jumped on that wave with me. And I really appreciate you for that.
Dude, this was so much fun. So you wrote and I asked you, hey, what do you want to talk about at the end of this? And you said, hey, nothing. But I want to talk about real business connections. And in a minute, like, how would you describe the conversations and the space that you create inside of real business connections for those listening who do want to tune in and hear more from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's holistic, such a trendy term, but I actually try to be as holistic as possible. If you go to a personal trainer and all they know how to do is work your left arm, you'd fire them immediately. They need to know full body, mindset, diet, sleep, exercise. So Real Business Connections tackles two main topics, personal growth and business, but we do it in short form, bite-sized tips. We do it in long form conversations, the story behind the story with international mentors. I do it with my local community of Rochester, New York. I have solo episodes. I replay other shows. So I've played Be Better on my stream, kind of like a rerun, but on my network. And I get together with Brandon, Christine, and Andrew, and we do the ABC, lunch break live, and we have full dialogue, panel discussions. So I'm actually doing the best I can to not burn myself out, but at the same time, provide different kinds of learning based on what's best for the person. So just scroll through, look at the length, look at the topic, and if anything speaks to you, give it a listen. And if it stinks, give me a second chance, because I bet I'll at least get 1 out of 2 for you. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you. It's an incredible show, guys. Go check it out. Links are in the description to go check out Real Business Connections, as well as to go check out everything else that Ben's up to. His LinkedIn's on fire. It's a lot of fun. His personality shines through text just as much as it does through his voice on a podcast. So be sure to go to the description here. Go visit Ben. Go see what he's up to. He does a lot when it comes to marketing businesses as well, and getting your voice out there and getting yourself on more podcasts to share your message. If any of that resonates with you, just go check him out in the description. Ben, round 2, but technically round 1 was a great success. I've really enjoyed this time, brother, and
Let's
I'm just
go.
grateful to call you a friend, man. Thank you so
Same.
much.
Grateful for you too, Brandon. Dude, let's do this again at the lunch break. So, hey,
Next week, man. Let's do it.
let's rock.
I'll see you soon. This was a very, very fun conversation that I hope was just as applicable and relevant for you as it was for me. We talked about doing the positive actions and putting forth the positive intentions, yet there still being that resistance. There's still that part of life. For Ben, that part of life was drinking 10 to 20 times or maybe even more than what he is now. And he knew when he looked in the mirror, he's saying all these things, all these affirmations, you are enough, you are this, yet there was a part of him that maybe just didn't believe that, right? Is there a part of your life where when you look in the mirror and you put forth these positive intentions and you know that you are a good person, right? You know that you are meant for greatness. You know that you want to continue to be better. Is there one area of life that is lurking in the shadows? And if the answer is yes, take Ben's point and determine what is that area of life that's holding me back, that's in the shadows, and what is one thing that I can do today in order to make positive progress forward. Because if you can work on the darkness, then there's just a lot more surface area for that light to shine. I hope this episode has been helpful for you. Go check out the description to see Ben's podcast, to see what he does to help businesses, as well as all the other amazing things that he does. And thank you, as always, for being the best part of the Be Better team. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.